Hey everyone, this is Steve Bishop from ProgrammingMadeEasy.com, and first off, I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed because I had someone that I was going to bring on earlier this week. I had already planned to bring somebody on that was going to talk about some very important issues with regards to mental health, and he's also a programmer and a good developer, but he's a bit more on the PHP side, and I was going to bring him on, and unfortunately, we just couldn't get things arranged properly to do that. But luckily, my boss was willing to come on the show and do some questions and answers with me. Unfortunately, he also had to back out due to some business reasons. So I didn't want to let everybody down by, just kind of saying, we're not going to do it. And I wanted to make sure that I was still available to you guys, and then I still went ahead and did the broadcast. So here I am live, and I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to ask me questions completely live. So this is all unscripted. This is what you guys want to ask me. If you have a question for me, you can either use the chat, which is going to be down. If you look to, I'm looking, okay, it's going to be in this direction down here, I believe, right? There is a chat area that you can ask your questions live there, or you can also go to my Facebook page, which is the, just do a search on Facebook for Programming Made Easy, and you'll be able to find my Facebook page there, and you'll see that there's a comment thread that you can go ahead and post your questions there. There's also a link in the description of this video, so that if you want to just click on that link to go right to the post on Facebook, you can go there and go ahead and ask your questions. So I'll be keeping an eye on that thread on Facebook. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat section, below this video here, and I got to point the right direction. Everything is mirrored, I guess. Everything is kind of swapped over. So if you have one of those questions, like I said, just drop it in the chat below this video, and I'll keep my eye on that, and I'll also keep my eye on the Facebook thread. So, all right, to get started with, the first thing I was going to do is I was going to say, well, to kind of get the ball rolling, what are some of the things that you guys might want to know about me? Because here I am interviewing all these other people. Maybe I can interview myself, right? And then let you guys go ahead and chime in with your questions. So the first question that I would probably ask a typical person would be, how did you get into computers? Well, the way that I got into computers was actually a long time ago. The first computer I ever touched was a Commodore 64. So I don't know if you guys know what a Commodore 64 was, but these were an ancient device that you could play games like Pole Position and Tooth Invader. And I loved computers, but they were really just kind of more of a gaming console for me at the time, because Commodore 64, there really wasn't a lot that interested me as a kid regarding computers at that age. I think I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. So they were great. They were fun, and then later on, I, of course, became enamored with the Atari and the Nintendo systems that came out a little bit later than that. So I really didn't get into computers until my mother actually started dating someone who was very much in the IT field. And he had a computer at his home, and every time we'd go hang out over there, I would get on his computer, and I was doing some wonderful things with it. I was playing a lot of games on it, of course, but then I found this thing called a BBS. And so some of you guys who may have already watched some of my earlier Q&A videos, you may have heard me talk about that, how I used to do these BBS systems all the time. And the BBSs were, I kind of say they're the precursor to the internet, but they weren't really the precursor. They were typically around and a bit more popular than the internet until the internet really became popular. And they were basically a way that you could just set up your computer with a modem, and people would dial into your computer from their computer. And it's basically like a telnet client sort of thing that just, plugs right into whatever the host is that you have. And I was running this Turboard BBS is what I decided to go with. So I saw all these other BBS systems out there, and I decided I got to have one. And as soon as my first computer, which was a 486DX, that was my very first personal computer. My stepfather bought it for me. And the first thing I did was hooked it right up to the telephone and, set it up so that people could dial. And my mom and my stepdad absolutely hated this because now the telephone was always in use by my modem, right? Everybody was dialing into my computer and they couldn't use the phone. So it was kind of a problem. So that was basically my first real deep dive into computers, was BBSs. And then later on, I really started to, try to open them up, take the case open, replace the hard drive with a new hard drive. I wanted to upgrade my modem. That was the first piece of hardware. Because when I originally got my first modem, it was like a 14.4. And I wanted to upgrade, so I got like a 36, what is it, 36.6? I can't remember the numbers, but I wanted to upgrade my modem. So I had to pop that case open and pull out the old one and put the new one in. And that was my first real foray into actually fixing and repairing computers. So, all right, we got some questions. That's fantastic. I got one here from Ricardo. Ricardo asks, hey there, could you please give us a quick comparison between Office 365 and Google Apps Script? All right, well, Office 365 is Office 365 is basically is Microsoft's way of trying to put Office online so that they can build, sorry, had a little distraction there. Office 365 is an online suite essentially for Office apps. So you get most of the Word, the Excel, you can even get Access and those sorts of wonderful things, including an Outlook client. And the web versions of these applications, you're not going to be able to do very complex things with. However, you can download the full desktop editions of those different applications. So if you get 365, you can actually download the application. You can download the software to your computer and get the full-fledged suite of Office, which is really nice because now you can do both the online edition or you can do the one right on your desktop. Now, as far as Google Apps goes, Google Apps, they are pushing some of the technology to be a bit more online and a little less desktop-y. So you can do you can create documents, Excel spreadsheet type of things, PowerPoint presentations, and that sort of thing. And I actually do use Google Docs for a lot of the stuff that I do. As a matter of fact, a lot of you guys, if you go to my work files, those work files are hosted off my Google Drive, which is also part of the Google Docs suite. So I do put up some different Word documents and things like that. Like whenever I'm going to do one of these Q&A sessions with an interviewer, I typically, or an interviewee, I should say, I typically will put those questions on a Google Docs Word page or document, I should say, because I can access that from anywhere, right? I can just pull up my Google Drive, go right into the document and read that from anywhere, which is fantastic. It's a little less simple to do that with Office, right? Because Office, typically you're going to have your documents on your hard drive and you're going to be opening them up on your hard drive. And if it's sitting on your desktop at the office, and then you can't really just go into it from anywhere. But with Google Docs, you have the fantastic ability to just access that document from anywhere, which is really, really nice. So I would say really the combination of both is something I really like to do. Sometimes Office is, I would say, the premier way to do really professional looking documents and do your business management. Whereas Google provides a lot of that nice online flexibility and the sharing capabilities of documents. So I really use both. I do both of them, and I think that they're both wonderful technologies. I have another question here from the Techmanism. That's a great name. I like it. The Techmanism. How did you learn VBA? Well, how did I learn VBA? First, let me talk a little bit about where I came from tech-wise. I was working way back, way back. I started out as an administrator for a school. And this was my first real leap into real tech support, having a paid position doing tech support. And so I was an admin at this school. It was a very small school, only I'd say maybe 200 kids. It was a private school. And I was doing their administration work, and I was doing their computers, their computer support. And I even developed a an education process. I'm trying to think of what the word is. But I developed a system to teach the kids how to use computers, and I became the IT teacher of the school. And that was my first leap into actually doing professional tech support. Then I moved on to another company called Prime Networks, which Mark Yakel was my boss, quote unquote boss. And he actually was my best man at my wedding. And Mark was running his own company, his own IT support company, and he brought me on to do tech support. And that was really when I got into the diversity of technology. Then that led me to, I got a job offer with Gartman Technical Services, which is where I work right now. And you guys can see that's where I work right now. And Gartman Technical Services, they brought me on as an IT administrator because I had all these skills and tools with working in IT. But this whole time, I kind of had this relationship with development. I always kind of loved developing stuff. And the first code that I ever learned was for something called MIRC, which was an internet relay chat client. Some of you guys may know MIRC. It's still out there. It's still the most prevalent way that you can communicate if you get on the IRC network, or at the IRC networks, excuse me. And I learned to code with it. I was fairly good at it. I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was kind of one of those hobby things. So when I got this job over here at Gartman doing IT support, I noticed that they had a department that was dedicated to database and software development. And I was like, wow, I kind of envy those guys. I kind of wish I was doing that sort of stuff, but I'm happy with doing tech support. I was very, very happy. I had a great job doing tech support. But here was this opportunity to possibly go learn software development. And they were exclusively doing applications in Access. That was what they were doing, was Access. Because the original owner of the company, that was what he knew, and that's how he developed in. And then he just brought on more people as more products needed to be developed. He brought on other Access developers. And one day, I knocked on my boss's door, and I said, I'd like to do development. I'd like to do the Access stuff. And to my surprise, they were very, very open to this. They were like, yeah, absolutely. You can definitely. And they let me take the time to learn. And it took me a good solid 6 months, maybe 8 months before I felt fairly confident in my skills doing VBA and Access development. And then I started actually going out in the field with my boss, who was the owner at the time. Mickey was the owner of Gartman, and Mickey Gartman was the original founder of Gartman Technical Services. And he let me go out on some jobs with him, and we got some big projects that I ended up working on. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a struggle. I mean, it was a real struggle. I had to act and be professional, and I am not always the best at acting and being professional. I mean, I'm kind of one of those guys that wears my heart on his sleeve, and my emotions can sometimes get the better of me. And when it's so frustrating and difficult to work with, and here you have to be presentable in front of the customer and stuff, it was a challenge, but I got through it. And VBA, the methods in which I learned VBA was mostly through online tutorials. I wish I could remember the name of Function X. FunctionX.com was a website that I went to because they have a fantastic library of descriptions. It's a big encyclopedia of a lot of different languages, and Access was one of them. So I used that as a very big reference. And then I did a lot of studying through Pluralsight. Pluralsight.com was the main place that I went. I bought a subscription with them, and I just watched everything I could. I also watched a lot of YouTube videos to see whatever I could about Access and VBA coding. And that was really kind of where I learned VBA. That's because, okay. Oh, thank you, Ricardo. He says, great. That's because app scripts within the Google Suite is like VBA for Office, but that runs on the server. And said, oh, I did not know that. I was wondering, I saw you said the scripts, the Google Apps script allows you to script like VBA for your documents, but server side. And said, that is amazing. I did not know that. That's good to hear. I'm interested to find out more about that. I'll have to investigate that, Richard. So thank you for enlightening me about that, because I'm sure the only problem with that is, of course, as far as I know, Google has not come out with any Access or database type of applications like Access. So developing it might be a little difficult. Maybe with some Excel spreadsheets or their version of Excel and Word documents, you could probably do some scripting with. But typically, it's without Access, without being able to create those forms and reports and that sort of thing, I think it's going to be a little bit more complicated. So maybe they can make some inroads into that space. It'd be great if Google came out with some sort of product that mimicked Access. I mean, I think a lot of Access developers are just waiting for someone to come along to create a really good, decent competitor to Access. So I think Google has I think it's an untapped market that they aren't even aware of that exists. I think Access has become, pardon the red hair, but the redheaded stepchild, right? Access is kind of the forgotten software in a way with Office, but there are so many of us that use it that they kind of continue to support it. So maybe, if Google can come out with some sort of competitor to it, that would be fantastic, especially if, if they are doing this scripting behind the Google Docs. That's amazing. MS OneDrive provides the same experience as Google. Yeah, it does. It does. I think Google kind of was the pioneer in the market, and that was really why they're the big brand name right now. And Microsoft has definitely got some good products with their OneDrive, and integration with obviously the Office 365. So yeah, you can do a lot of the same stuff, but to Ricardo's point, and this is what I think he's bringing up, is that you can do these scripts behind the Google Apps, which is really, that's really cool. So I'm gonna have to definitely do some investigating with that. I don't think you have the same type of capabilities with OneDrive, right? Because OneDrive is just going to host the documents in the cloud, and that's not necessarily doing the scripting. Now you could bring that file, obviously, if you do VBA scripting behind that file, and then run that script on your local computer. That's great, but now you're running it on the client side, right? You're doing it on the client. You're not doing it on the server, and I think that's the difference here that Ricardo is pointing out, is that Google Docs, if with that scripting, is able to do the scripts on the server side rather than the client side, which the more server side you can get with things, I think the better. I do definitely want the division of things. I think that's the direction that most of the technology in our website is going. So Almir, he asks, can you talk about your tips to become .NET full stack developer? Some steps or learning paths to become full stack. Okay. Full stack development. Obviously, you need the foundations of C#. Okay, you need to know C# development. And this starts out, typically, a lot of the first forays into C# development are going to use console applications, right? You learn how to write a console application because that's more of a procedural type of system. We are used to, we are used to chronological things. We are used to a process of manipulating what they call state over time. Okay, so I make a change and I save it. I make another change, I save it. I make another change, I save it. But you make these changes over a period of time. And a console application in C# is very much a more chronological way of doing things, because the interaction is almost entirely the application asks, the user responds. The application asks, the user responds. So it's easy to manage these chronological situations. So most of the time, that's what you're going to learn in your initial tutorials. But there is, once you get to more like WPF or the ASP.NET or even the Windows forms, you have to start to learn about object-oriented programming, which is kind of interesting. I'll probably talk about something else here in just a second regarding object-oriented programming. But object-oriented programming is a completely different paradigm and way that you have to think about the way that you want to develop, because it's not chronological. You still maintain state. You still keep track of the data throughout a certain time. But instead of thinking about things as far as, you know, taking a piece of data and then changing it and then changing it and changing it, you actually store these things in these classes, and then these classes inherit from other classes. So you start to think about the process not in terms of chronological, but how can you build or expand upon classes that already exist and then reuse that code. And that becomes a different way that you have to think about how you do the development. Instead of thinking about the time frames, the chronological time that things happen, you have to start focusing more about the actual architecture of your application. How are you going to develop something that is going to be reusable code, so you don't have to keep repeating yourself over and over again. And that's just something that I think really comes with experience and trial and error in doing things. To get to WPF, and to a certain extent Silverlight, which uses MVVM instead of Model View Controller, that is another paradigm altogether too, because you're essentially using events and event handlers in order to notify your user interface that there's been some sort of change to the state in the background. And that's kind of one of those things that has to be bridged, and that's why events really even exist, is so that you can create these notifications to the user interface or some other subscriber to this publishing event. So you have to learn, especially if you're going to get into WPF, you've really got to understand events and delegates, and func of T and that sort of thing is going to become very important. And so if you learn the MVVM architecture, the infrastructure of how to develop your forms in WPF, that will go a long way into creating those desktop apps on the client side. Now, to become an ASP.NET developer, now you've got really a specialty that's going on. And I think this is where becoming a quote unquote full stack developer is almost a hindrance in a way, because you have to focus on so many different disciplines. Honestly, WPF, Windows Forms, console applications, even Silverlight to an extent, and Silverlight's kind of obviously going out the door. It's not nearly as complicated as web development, I think, simply because with that you have to learn, you have to learn the XML, the XAML, behind doing WPF forms. And then you have to understand how to code behind that with the MVVM architecture and all that good stuff. But once you've got that down, I mean, you're pretty much set, because the technology is not going anywhere. It's kind of going to be the standard for a while in that space. But when it comes to web development, it's a whole other ballgame, because you have to learn more than beyond just the Microsoft stuff, right? You can learn C#, you can learn how to do Razor syntax, you can learn how to do the object-oriented programming, but that's not the end of it. Now you have to focus about the client side, and that involves JavaScript, jQuery, Angular, or React, or any number of these other types of suites that are out there for the JavaScript side. So you have to learn JavaScript. Signal R is another great technology that Microsoft came out with. But I mean, now the number of disciplines that you've had to learn to get into the web development side is tremendous. And I think it's this growth in the web industry that almost makes some of the desktop applications, the WPFs, the WinForms, that sort of thing, it's really becoming almost, I'm not going to say it's an anchor, but it is kind of a hindrance in a way to the progress for a lot of developers to have to try to maintain these apps that are in the WPF and the WinForms spaces. They're just not as popular now, even at the enterprise level. And if you think about the architecture involved with that, it makes sense from a business perspective. If I can host a web application on a single box and then have all these browsers connect to that single box, my resources in order to do the development have decreased dramatically. I don't need these supercomputers. I don't need to, like, compare this to Microsoft Access. You have to have a full client that has to be installed at everyone's desktop, and that's a lot of money. Whereas with a web application, I just make my change, post it up on the IIS service, and boom, now everybody's got the most up-to-date release, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'm glad to see the chat is exploding here, so I have to read through some of these comments. But anyway, Almir, I hope that I answered your question. I know that's kind of a difficult topic to go down because it's so many different avenues that you can go with it. But I would say focus mostly on learning the web side, because that's where I think the explosion in the industry is going. WPF would be the next thing I would definitely learn. So I'm assuming that if you already know C# or VB.NET is also possible, but I wouldn't really go VB.NET. C# is the main primary language that Microsoft is going through. So once you learn C#, get your basics down, learn events, learn delegates. I'd even say if you could learn functional programming, that would be great. And then from there, learn web, because honestly, WPF is a breeze compared to the stuff you have to learn for web. So I would just start going down that road. Let's see, let me just read some of these. You are able to even communicate exactly. You will teach anything about ClickView. Oh, will I teach anything about ClickView? Probably not. I know somebody who knows ClickView. He uses it extensively, loves it, does all his reporting through it. But honestly, I'm so in love with web. I just might as well. I can do so much more with web and make it easy for interfaces that I just found that ClickView is. I mean, it's got its purposes. It's definitely an enterprise type of application that a lot of businesses like to use because it's simple. You could just very easily create queries to go query the data, and pull out what you need and format it for nice reports. So I understand why you'd want to learn ClickView. I would say it's probably not a technology. It's a niche technology. It's not something that a lot of businesses use on a regular basis. But if you learn it, I mean, I'm sure you can find a job very easily doing it. And you can probably write your own ticket as far as, if a company's latch themselves on to ClickView and you know how to do it, you can pretty much write any figure down on a piece of paper and they'll pay you to do it. So it's kind of one of those type of things. Let's see. Anyone know PHP? I actually know a little bit about PHP. I've been doing a lot more .NET stuff than PHP, just simply because I think it's a better supported framework than PHP. PHP's got a lot of open source stuff. And with open source, and this isn't always talked about, but there's a bit of a danger with open source in that businesses can get attached to certain libraries, and then the person that was doing the development or the people that were doing the development of those open source libraries goes away. They stop supporting it. And now you've got businesses that are latched onto a technology that's not going to hang around. I know a lot of businesses that got in trouble with that type of thing. And it happens in the .NET realm too, don't get me wrong. There's NuGet packages all the time that come and go, and they don't use the latest, greatest technology. And when Microsoft comes out with ASP.NET Core, they don't have a .core net or .NET Core version of their NuGet package anymore. So, they pretty much, you as a company can't continue to grow, or you have to make the decision to stop using this thing that's been so effective for you. Now you got to go through all your code and eliminate all those parts. So just be very careful. If you're going to go into PHP, try not to rely too much on the single developer libraries. Make sure that you have a good community supporting those open source libraries, okay? Otherwise, you're going to be running into some problems with dropping of support, especially when PHP, what is it, PHP 7 now, I think that's out. And that every time that they upgrade to a new major version, that means all the stuff that you had suddenly either stops working or doesn't work in the same way it used to. So just be very careful about that. I should have leave OneDrive. You cannot manipulate it with the cloud. VBA is quite hard. I learned simple JavaScript, but always disturb both. Disturb both. You disturb both. Yeah, VBA is kind of hard. I think it's funny because I first learned VBA. Well, I first learned IRC. We talked about that earlier. VBA is kind of difficult. It's supposed to be simpler because you're learning a language based upon regular human language. You're not really talking in computer speak or this special language. They're trying to make it so that you are talking in your if loops. If this, then this, and if. That makes great sense rather than what are these curly braces and brackets and what do I need parentheses for and why do I need a semicolon for all these things, And, you forget a semicolon in C# or Java and all of a sudden, the whole world comes crashing down. Whereas with VB and VBA, you're supposedly talking normal human language and that's supposed to make things easier. But it really doesn't in a way because it's not as terse a language, right? It's more verbose, and that verbosity can sometimes lead to some confusing syntax. And it means other keywords that you might like to use, like you can use in C#. You can't use them because they're occupied by the VBA language. But it is a good introductory language for some people, simply because of the more linguistic style to it. So I learned it, and if I can learn it, I think that you guys could probably learn it too, right? I mean, of all people, if I can learn it, I think you guys should be able to. Can you teach how to automatically generate records in Access? Unless you already did, then please send me a link to video. How to automatically generate records in Access. And I just realized I have been ignoring the Facebook side of this. Creating an automatic record in Access. I don't really know what you mean by that. Are you talking about with VBA? Are you talking about with queries, creating a query to create a record? I'm not, or are you talking about when somebody enters a value into a form? I don't really know what you mean by that. So I'm not really sure how to answer you there. Sorry, bear with me here. I'm just going to pull up the Facebook post to see if anybody posted anything. My goodness, everybody's just leaving my Facebook post in the dust and not saying anything. I don't know why. Well, maybe it's because I only reached 11 people on that Facebook post. I don't know. But that's good. We've got a good, nice little chat going on here on YouTube. So I'll continue on with this. So Fred says, hello, been writing custom business WinForm apps for a long time, mostly VB, most recently C#. When I talk to customers about moving to a web-based, browser-based app, I found it a bit of resistance. Yeah, and I can understand that. I mean, there's, they've become accustomed to things, right? And people don't like change, and businesses especially don't like change, at least the businesses that are not used to accepting change, right? The bigger the business, the more inertia it has, right, that you have to overcome. The smaller businesses, sometimes, you can talk them into it because they're looking for ways to get to the cutting edge of things. But if you talk in terms of resources with them, I think that you'll find they're much more receptive to it, especially once you can talk about portability. If you can indicate to them, look, we can build an application that will be instantly updated, right? So when we make a change to a web application, it's done immediately. The client that needs to be installed on everybody's computer is already there. If they have a web browser, they already have access to the application. So they don't need any sort of special client that needs to be installed. We don't have to worry about updates being pushed out to all of those things. And also the network strain tends to be a little bit less because you're dealing strictly with an HTTP protocol, as opposed to trying to push out data like if you're doing direct SQL queries or something like that, then you're pushing the data directly from SQL, and now you're driving some of that data back and forth across the client. You're making the client more dependent upon the resources of the computer that's hosting it. So you've got to have fast enough computers. You've got to have all of the prerequisites installed. The .NET frameworks all need to be updated properly. Now you're talking about some security issues also, because your clients will all pretty much have to have some way to get access to those databases. And that typically, in a lot of cases, means that you are storing usernames and passwords to those databases on the client side. That is a dangerous, dangerous habit that I see all the time. It's a bad practice. You should be using Windows authentication for your SQL access, but because it is more complicated to administer, which is another point you would want to bring up with your potential client, is that you need to do this Windows application, or this Windows management. So you have to keep your DCs up to date. You have to keep your SQL Server up to date with the authentication. And so most of the developers just simply bring in some sort of special password for the SQL Server, and they may encrypt it, but they're storing it on the client side. And now somebody who gets a hold of that client, if they're industrious enough, they can crack that password, and now you've got a security breach. And especially, this is how a lot of hackers get into systems. They infect with some sort of worm or Trojan on some client that is at a business, some secretary or some manager or something like that. They've got a computer that gets infected. They have the .NET client installed on their computer, and that hacker goes and proceeds to deconstruct that .NET code, and they find the username and password to this SQL database along with the IP addresses. And now that hacker has complete access to all the data. You have a monumental security breach right there because of the architecture. With a web-based version of this, it's still possible for hackers because, if they gain entry, they can still possibly get to that web server, but you have a completely different layer. The web server itself is what contains all of the user access information to connect to the database, and you can encrypt that information. But again, typically you want to make that Windows authentication. And once you make that Windows authentication, which is much easier to do because now you're talking from server to server, you just simply have to set up some sort of user account with an app pool, and that app pool is going to obscure that password in the app pool. And now it's almost impossible for a hacker. It's still possible, but it's much, much, much more complicated for them to be able to gain entry into your system. And if it's an enterprise system where you're hosting this internally and not online, well, then how is a hacker even going to get in there, right? They would have to have the ability to remote into someone else's computer and then get to the web server. So really, it's a much more secure process. The amount of resources required is less because now you only need one server to host the data and one server to host the SQL server, one host for the web server. And then all the different clients, you don't need any special software to install. You just simply have the web browser, and that makes your life a lot easier, and it means less time for development. It means it's going to save them money in the long run, both in cost of resources for the for the software that needs to be installed and the hardware that it's going to be installed on, as well as the resources to do the development, because now you just have a developer posting something up on IIS or Kestrel or Apache or something like that, and you're done. I have tutorials about ASP.NET Core. Oh yeah, I'm going to continue doing my tutorials on ASP.NET Core. I plan on completing that series, and I'll probably do some advanced courses because ASP.NET Core is currently my what I really love to do. So I definitely will be continuing on with that. I'm going to try to get into a bit more of the architectural things a little bit later on because I find the architectural stuff fascinating. I'm a big advocate of what Robert C. Martin is pushing with professionalism and craftsmanship in our industry. So if you're interested, go check out Robert C. Martin's videos. He's all over YouTube, but try to do that after I'm done here. Just personal bias, you know. I want to do an airline system using VBA, and I need to generate records for flights or go the weekly flights. Okay. Well, there's really no reason. You definitely should learn database architecture because that's really where the start of Access is, right? Your data is everything in Access. Once you have that structure down of your database tables and you're creating your records of your airplane flights, you're going to need that proper structure because the better you have your database normalized, the faster it's going to respond to your queries. I don't know what type of environment you're putting it in. I don't know if this is supposed to be an enterprise scenario or if you're just doing this for yourself. But if latency is at all a concern of yours, then you definitely want to do some normalization, and I would say do it on a SQL database, and then use VBA code to do some DAO or ADO calls directly to the database. Don't even bother writing your own queries in Access. Just do them straight through the VBA code. Your response time will increase dramatically. Your footprint on your computer will decrease dramatically because you're not going to be using the ACE engine anymore because you're going to be writing your queries to interact directly with the SQL server as opposed to having an interpreter. So if you could do those things, then you're going to make your response time a lot faster. So focus on the normalization. Make sure that your records are properly normalized and properly normalized database. And then you can start to build on your forms to make the user input and output a lot easier for the user interface. Reporting is probably the one thing that is more business related, right? Your businesses always want to get the best reporting that they possibly can. So that would probably be the third thing I would focus on. And all the while, of course, you're doing VBA to write your forms and write your reports. So with web apps, don't you need something like SharePoint to house the data? All right, Daryl, with web apps, don't you need something like SharePoint? That is only if you're talking about Microsoft Access web applications, okay? Web applications is a term that we use to describe any application that is built on the web platform. So if it's doing some sort of protocol request over HTTP or HTTPS, then that is essentially a web application. If it's presented through a browser, that is a web application. Typically, I don't really know that there's much of a distinction between web applications and websites, other than typically websites are a kind of like a postcard kind of thing where users can go to your website to explore information about a company, whereas a web application is where you have some sort of enterprisey type of actual work that you want done, right? An actual application where a business conducts its business over that application. So that's really the only distinction I guess I can probably make between a website and a web app. But Access as a web app architecture, I'm not particularly fond of. I've tried it a few times. I don't like that I can only do macros. I don't like that my VBA coding gets scrapped because, I mean, VBA code for me is the lifeblood of an application. And if I can't do that, then all I'm really doing is writing forms, reports, and queries. And with some macro stuff. And the macros can be doing some very powerful things, don't get me wrong. It's just not as it's not as easy for me. I think it seems like a little bit more complicated to do that. So as far as to house the data, That's only, again, if you're going to be doing it in Access, right? That's where your data gets typically stored, is on SharePoint. Now, that being said, if you're going to do a web app in something like ASP.NET or in PHP or Ruby or something like that, then you're going to have a database, an actual database that is storing it, unless you're going the NoSQL route. But even those are, I guess, databases. They're just not relational databases. So the ASP.NET type of stuff, you're going to be using some sort of database in the background. It doesn't have to be SharePoint. As a matter of fact, SharePoint uses Microsoft SQL database as its backend. So SharePoint is actually using Microsoft SQL database. So your SharePoint is not actually the host of the data. It is just simply an interface. It is a web interface for accessing your data, but it has certain, constructs like lists and forms and stuff that you can create. You can post up your documents and that sort of thing up there. I'm going to take one more look here at the Facebook page to see if anybody has posted any questions there. I'm glad that so many of you guys have engaged me on this. I really appreciate it. I was really feeling down because, like I said, I was going to bring on a good friend of mine from England we were going to talk about some personal stuff that I thought was really good. And then my boss, he also had to back out when my friend had to back out. So I'm glad that you guys all responded to this and you guys all wanted to ask me some questions live, because I was really kind of wondering if I was going to get enough questions to even do this. So I started writing my own questions for myself. Let's see. What would be a growth path from Access? Daryl, that's a good question. What would be a good growth path from Access? It depends on where you want to go with your career, because Access, I think, is probably, if you're going to become a DBA, right? Which I'm a DBA. That's probably the most direct path. If you learn Access, you at least have the foundations of understanding how the architecture and infrastructure of an application works. You understand that you need a database. You understand that you need some code behind forms and reports and queries, right? You learn the basics from Access. Then from there, you can decide, well, what is the most interesting part to me? What about creating an Access is the most fun and interesting for me? If you like the data manipulation and working with data, writing queries, figuring out how to store things, doing statistics, that sort of thing, then you could definitely become a DBA. You could learn Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, PostgreSQL, that sort of thing. You learn how to become a DBA, you can find a job. I mean, DBAs make some good money. So that's definitely one career path. And I think it's probably the easiest path to go once you learn Access, because relational database management systems are all pretty well universal in their structure, right? They host data in tables that you write queries for, and you manage the data through user access and certain maintenance tasks. There really isn't much difference between technologies as far as that goes. Once you become a DBA, it's going to be around for a long time. It's a solid foundation that every application needs to use. So that's something that is definitely an easy path to go. Now, if you want to do the coding path, if you're looking to go more towards development side, then you're going to absolutely have to learn something else. You're going to have to learn, and I would say C#. That's why I focused so heavily on bringing over the C# series. And I know my C# basics course doesn't really get quite as many views as my Access videos. As a matter of fact, it gets less views than my ASP.NET videos. Maybe you guys don't even know that I have the C# basics course. I released them all. It's kind of funny. I did the C# basics course. I wanted to do them all big release. So I did all of my C# basics course, recorded everything, put it all together, arranged it, and then released it all on one day. And I watched my viewership go WPF if you're going to continue desktop side, learn WPF, learn the XAML that goes behind it, the XAML, because that's going to become very important, knowing how to do that with events and stuff like that. The MVVM, pattern is something you're going to have to learn. Once you've got that down, I mean, if you go into that direction, you can find work. If you go into the web side, like we were talking about before, you've got a lot more that you got to do. What happened? I lost all my viewers. That's interesting. What are the most popular method to create forms and reports for SQL Server? Most popular methods for reporting to create forms and reports for SQL Server. Reports would be SQL Server reporting services, so SSRS. That is kind of the main way that most people go, is SQL Server reporting services. So you're going to want to learn that if you're going to do the reporting, and a lot of businesses require it. If you're going to be a DBA, you have to know SQL Server reporting services. It's just a requirement, which also means you have to get Visual Studio installed, because Visual Studio is where you write those reports in now. So you're going to have to learn SQL Server reporting services. That's where most of the enterprises, if they're doing Microsoft SQL Server, they do that. Now, if you're talking about as far as forms and the ability for people to interact with the data, for forms, it really just is kind of your choice. What do you want to do? Like we were talking about before, do you want to do WPF? Do you want to do WinForms? Do you want to do a web-based version, HTML, CSS, that sort of thing? I'd say the most popular way of doing things now, and where the industry is going, is web, right? Just web-based everything. So if you're going to want to go that route, if you're trying to look for the most popular route to go, you're going to have to learn something like ASP.NET or PHP, or Ruby is also another popular one, or Java. Java can also do it. That's just something you're going to have to get into if you're going to be creating those web-based applications that interact with your databases. You asks, anything is necessary for becoming a data analyst? A data analyst? Well, it depends on, different companies want different things from data analysts. Sometimes data analyst is, their interpretation of the job is somebody who can write good reports. Okay, that's what some of them think that a data analyst is. Others want you to be able to write good queries that present the right data to those reports. And really, in my opinion, that's more of what a data analyst specializes in. How can I take this big blob of data and figure out the most interesting business metrics to create those reports? I'm not going to focus on the reporting itself, not on how it looks and the charts and the graphs and that sort of thing. I'm more interested in, from a data analyst perspective, how can I take these pieces of information and form them together into some interesting pieces of information that the business can now look at and say, oh, we received the most growth in the female, in the female age 18 through 24 when we started using a red logo. Okay, if that's the sort of thing that businesses are very concerned with, but it's not something that everybody thinks about, right? And that's really the job of the data analyst, is to try to figure out what is the relevant data, what is the important data to that business. So really, what is necessary for becoming that data analyst, it's more than just the technological know-how, right? It's more than just being a DBA. It's more than just knowing how to do the tools with data, with like SQL Server analysis services and working with cubes and that sort of thing. That's all great, but that's just the tool. What you really have to do is have a mind for finding those little nuggets. And sometimes it's very simple process, because your boss will come to you and say, hey, can you find out some information for me on, the demographic, the men aged 40 to 45, we're thinking about releasing a new product. We want to try to get some information about whatever. And they're going to come to you with the requirement. Now you have to go through the data and you have to figure out how to form it and put it together. So you're going to need to learn like SQL Server analysis services and SQL Server reporting services too, typically, because Usually they're going to want you to also create the report for them, which is always really annoying for an analyst. It's really annoying. We just want to be able to, okay, you have this thing that you want me to go find. You want me to go find the data. So let me go do that, and then I'll put it together for you and present it. Typically, analysts don't really particularly like having to deal with the gooey type of stuff, the actual reporting and making it look all spiffy and stuff. We don't want to worry about that. We just want to know, how do we need to write our queries to get the relevant data, and maybe we'll plot it on a graph somewhere, and we like to look at that. We go, ooh, oh, that's some interesting information I didn't know. Almir, you said my internet connection was down, so I did not know if you have talked about my question about MS certification. Oh, there it is. Your tips about MS certification, MCP, and MCSD, some learning tips and good ways for preparation for them. Learn your butt off. That's really it. Just have a curious mind. There's a lot of different tutorials out there to go over all those certifications and try to prepare you for it. And a lot of them are very, very technical. Those certifications are very, very technical. They are going to surprise you with questions that you're going to be like, oh, I didn't even think about trying to figure that out. So study them multiple times. Go over those tutorials over and over again. Those handy guides that different people release online. There's lots of YouTube videos that will kind of guide you through some of the questions they'll be asked. There's a lot of web pages out there that you can do the research to find out some of the questions you'll be asked. But really just keep researching. Just learn. You'll be surprised at how many ancillary type of technologies become relevant to those kind of questions that they're going to ask. And suddenly you're going to know more about what that question is trying to get to, because you'll know those under other technologies. It's really kind of a difficult question to answer. Some learning tips and good ways for preparing. I'll tell you about me. When it comes to tests, I never cram. I never, ever cram for a test. I just have to think, if I haven't learned it, then I haven't learned it. And this test is going to reflect that for me. So don't think of these certification tests as like some sort of big hurdle that you have to overcome. Think of them as a reflection of your knowledge. And then if you fail it, don't worry, you can retake it, okay? But at least now you understand, oh, wow, I did not realize how in-depth these certification tests were going to be. And that's one of the main reasons why I never crammed it. I was a horrible student in school. I'll just to let you guys know, I was a horrible student, but I was a fantastic test taker. I hated homework. I never did homework. It was, my opinion on school was, why am I going to school for 8 hours a day just to have to come home and do another 4 hours of work? That's not what I do. I don't watch my parents do this. This is not what they do. They don't bring their work home with them. They work for 8 hours. Why am I going to school for 8 hours only to have to come home to do another 4 hours worth of homework? That seems silly to me. If I haven't learned it at school, what's the point of me going to school? That was my principle back then. I had really high principles. I did terribly in school, but I always did really, really well on tests. And that's because I was very curious. I paid attention. I listened. I really focused on what they were saying, and I tried to internalize. And one of the tricks that I always did was I tried to restate what they stated in my own words. That is a very, very key component to learning, is being able to take something, digest it, and regurgitate it. And if you have somebody around you that is willing to listen to you talk about these things, talk with them about it, okay? That is a huge leg up. If you can find somebody that is willing to discuss these things with you, then you will be processing that information. You will be going through it in your mind and regurgitating it and talking about it and realizing. And sometimes you'll have those great interactions with somebody else that they know something better than you know it. And now they've stated it. And now you get it because you're having this dialogue, you're having this connection in learning. So I would say if you can find someone to work with on it, that would be really, really good. What do you pretend with the ASP.NET course series? Pretend, what do you pretend? That's interesting. I think you must have done some sort of translator there, I think, because pretend is an interesting word to use there. I think you're talking about what are my plans for the series. I just want to basically get the basics down. I want to get the basics down and then also do some of the more complex things. I think one of the big things that I always get asked to do, and I definitely will be doing because it's something that I don't think is covered nearly enough, is the identity integration using ASP.NET Core Identity. The transformations, the transformers that go into that are not covered hardly anywhere. You can almost find no material anywhere on how to do those transforms. So I will definitely, absolutely be covering that because I think it is probably one of the most overlooked parts of the ASP.NET Core is that identity. And honestly, I don't like the changes that they made. I really don't. They're relying too much on concepts that were not really being used very much. And now they just shifted over completely away. You can't do the custom attributes anymore, which I think is just absolutely nuts. I can't write my own authentication attributes. That is just, I'm blown away with that. How did you come with that type of mentality? I can't write my own custom code to do the authentication. What on earth could you possibly be thinking? And it alienated a lot of us, right? And they say, oh, well, every scenario is covered. Great. Every scenario is covered, but I can't, unless I'm thinking exactly the way that you guys are thinking, I don't know how to cover that scenario. And that just made things way, way, way more complicated. So I'm really not happy with the direction that they went with ASP.NET Core for Identity. So just so you guys are aware of that. Oh, wow, you're great. Oh, thank you, Piping, PPING. I really appreciate that. I think you're great too. Thanks for watching. Hey, I love these Q&A sessions. I like being able to ask people interviews, but I'm really glad that you guys have all decided to come on and watch and respond to this. This is great. So I do kind of have to wind it down here a little bit. We've reached an hour long on this conversation. I'm not going to leave just yet, so don't go anywhere. I'm going to continue to answer some of your guys' questions, but just to let you guys know, my time that I've allocated for doing this is starting to come to a close. I'm learning about some tech about data analysis like SAS, SPSS, SQL Access, but I find it's not enough to be a data analyst. You're absolutely right, you. It's not enough. They're teaching you the tools. That's what they're teaching. They're teaching you the tools. They're not teaching you about how to use the tools in an effective manner in the way that businesses are going to be asking you. Now, that's because educational institutes are interested in curriculum. They're not interested in the applications of the curriculum. That is one of the main reasons why you have internships, okay? Because you take the actual knowledge and you learn to apply it. And even if you find that you're yourself in an unpaid role as an intern, it is worth doing because you will get the hands-on experience and understanding and knowledge. And suddenly you'll go into those classrooms where they're covering material that you'll go, oh, I know why this is important, rather than just going, I wonder why this is important. Okay, and that's a big difference. Knowing why something is important versus trying to figure out why it's important. That's that light bulb moment that we all love to enjoy, right? That's the reason why we're even in this industry, is because we love to understand the hows and the whys and the whats. Knowing what is not enough. Knowing why is not enough. Knowing the how, there's where you start to really become a good developer, a good analyst, a good programmer, that sort of thing. Marcos, that's okay. I don't mind. I'm glad I hope I interpreted your question correctly. The prepend word kind of threw me there for a second, but I think that's what you were getting at. So if I didn't, please feel free to re-ask your question and I'll get to it. Oh, well, thank you, Daryl. I really appreciate that you guys have come on. And Daryl says, I really appreciate your willingness to share in your presentation style. Thank you. Well, thank you. I really do appreciate that, Daryl. I'm glad you guys enjoy it. I'm glad that I can open up these type of forums to you guys And you know, based upon the success of this Q&A session, I'm probably going to do some more because you know, I had a little trepidation in doing it at first, but like I said before, early on, when, you know, both of my interviewees backed out, I said, I'm not going to leave you guys alone. I'm going to have to do something. So I'm glad that this worked out. I'm glad that this became something that I can do, and maybe we'll do it again here, you know, based upon the success here. Any more questions here? I'm preparing right now for MT software development, and I am very comfortable with it. Thank you for the answers. You are a legend. Oh, I'm a legend now. Oh dear. Oh, I'm not a legend. Don't give me a bigger head than I already have. My wife already can't stand me at home. She says I got too big of an ego, so she always has to knock me down. So I don't think that I'm quite at legend status. I think that's for guys like you know, Robert C. Martin, Martin Fowler. Those guys are legends. Those guys. If you guys ever get a chance to listen to Martin Fowler or Robert C. Martin, do so. They are pioneers in the industry. And there's lots of other great developers and pioneers in the industry too. But I guess I just really am fond of those two guys. Thank you. A support from Hong Kong. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's amazing. I get so many viewers from all across the globe. It's really amazing. If you stop to think about that, we didn't have this kind of technology just 15 years ago, right? Or even 10 years ago, really. It was kind of around 10 years ago, but really 15 years ago, this would have been pretty much impossible, right? What we're doing right now, where you guys ask me questions and I answer them live on a broadcast, and I'm just some unknown guy just sitting in an office in Phoenix, right? And I can answer all of you guys from all across the world. And I think that's absolutely amazing. Mustafa says, thanks for the MS Access series. Watch start till end. I'm looking for an option in FTP with timer every 10 to 15 seconds to upload JSON file from PC to web server. GoDaddy, please assist. Yeah, Mustafa, that's just such a complex topic. And I get this kind of thing all the time on questions, and I could probably use this forum to address this. I get a lot of these really in-depth questions about, I want to do this and how do I do it? And the problem is that in order to do it, we're talking about design concepts that are very, very complicated, very complex. And we start to have to talk about how to do the JSON, how to do the infrastructure of your database, how to proceed with the uploads using, you know, the different protocol classes to connect to upload the JSON to the FTPs. And there's just a whole lot of information that you have to learn in order to do that. That it's just impossible to answer a question like that in one comment or even one video. I could do an hour-long video like this one, and I would barely even scratch the surface about how to do something like that. The best advice I can give you here, Mustafa, is figure out what each one of those components are that you need to learn to get to what you want. Learn about FTPs, learning about the Microsoft Access, learn about the tables, learn about JSON, learn about how to do the classes that can do the pushes of the data. I'm not really sure that that's the best architecture to be pushing JSON files up to FTP. I think I'm reading, I don't know if I'm reading that right, to a web server GoDaddy. I think you're trying to put JSON files and host them up on a web server. I think that's what you're trying to do. You have I think what you're saying is you have a database that you want to push JSON files up to the web server through FTP, and then that web server will host the data. That's doable, I guess. But JSON files are typically not files. They're not actual documents. I mean, they are documents, but they're not like a text document that you're going to be uploading to a server. JSON is typically a formatted, it's almost a protocol, a data formatting protocol. Similar in ways to how SQL servers communicate their data back, like an XML document, for example. XML documents are not necessarily documents. They're not files that exist on a hard drive somewhere with all the data in it. They are dynamically constructed. They look at the data and then they create the data infrastructure in XML format, and then some sort of reader takes that XML and interprets it. This is exactly what JSON does. It's not a document, it's a dynamically created data format that databases or different clients will read and then interpret that data. So you really don't want to be uploading files like a JSON file. That's not the point of JSON. JSON is a dynamically constructed data format for your clients to read. So I think you're kind of going down the wrong path with that. And maybe that's something that we can talk about later. Maybe that's something I can discuss in another video or something. But really just start thinking more in terms of how can you create an API? You should be focusing on APIs, okay? How can you create like a web API that presents JSON applications? That is where you should probably be going, or JSON documents, excuse me. That's where you should be going with that, rather than trying to do an Access database that pushes JSON. Now, you can do what you're trying to do. It's not going to be real time. It's going to be delayed. You're going to have timers. There's going to be problems. But just maybe rethink your architecture and how you're planning on doing that. Okay, I'm just going to tell you that. That's great for your time. Looking forward to being in more of these. Thank you, Fred. I look forward to it too, and I hope to see you guys at the next one of these that I do. Are you planning to let us know future live videos with any sort of anticipation? I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to get the word out in an earlier way. I was thinking about this. Probably the best way for you guys to know about it would be if you go to my Facebook page, because I always try to let you guys know about this stuff. So if you don't know about my Facebook page, it's facebook.com/programming made easy, just like the name of the website. So programming made easy, that's capital E, capital Z. If you go there, you can follow my posts. I post whenever I have a new video, I post it up there. Whenever I have a comment that I want to make, I'll post it up there. And whenever I do one of these interviews or in my opinion videos or live broadcasts, I always post it up there and notify you guys up there. So if you guys want the best way to find out, just go to the Facebook page and you could do that. I suppose I could probably also do some of the Google Plus stuff too. I don't know how many, Google Plus doesn't really tend to be a big draw. Not a lot of people do Google Plus. But maybe if I had enough people that wanted to go there in order to get notified, I could do it there. Maybe a subscriber list of some sorts. Unfortunately, YouTube doesn't really give you any way to send a big mass message to everybody that's a subscriber. I'm kind of surprised that that's not something that they do, but unfortunately, it's just the case. Almir, let me just check on, speaking of Facebook, let me just check and see has anybody even asked me a question on Facebook. I've been trying to keep an eye on it, and I don't think anybody has. 19 people are reached. Oh boy. Yeah, so nobody's really even going to Facebook to do this, which is kind of amazing because the technology is so easy to use. Almir, thank you, Almir, for chiming in on this discussion with Mustafa. He says maybe Mustafa needs some web API implementation for his problem to consume it with an app. Bingo! That is exactly where I was going with it. A web API, using MVC to create a web API would probably be the best route for him to go, because you can just tie directly into the database and then present that to as a JSON document or an XML document, or however you want to format it, to your consumers. So that is exactly the route I would recommend, and that's how I would do it. Giovanni, that's great. I don't know what you're saying. That's great too. I'm sorry, I don't know. And Almir, he says consume. I think he's correcting himself. So I think we're winding down here, guys. I'm not seeing any questions on Facebook. Looks like you guys are out of questions for me on YouTube. So I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. But this has been absolutely fantastic. This has been great. I am going to leave you guys with one little thing here. I don't mean to plug too many things. I know typically when I do an interview with somebody, I plug I try to let them talk to you guys about their product, because, and I don't bring people on that have products that I don't have some confidence in, right? Like Jason, for example, Jason Duke, he has a great SEO system. He does SEO like no one else. And I wouldn't have brought him on if I didn't think that he could give you guys a tool that you could present to your bosses or that you could use yourself without it being very, very useful. Jason is a great guy, and he just does wonderful things with SEO, and he is really at the top of the business. He is one of the industry leaders in that space. I would not have brought him on if I didn't have full confidence in him. So I typically don't want to do plugs unless there's a good reason for us to do it. And I want to give my interviewers an opportunity to talk about their business, because they're spending the time to talk to you guys about their industry, and giving them that forum, that opportunity for them to also talk about how they're making money. That's really important as well. So that being said, I'm going to give a little plug here to Gartman Technical Services, the company I work for. And you'll see that I'm trying to be a bit more about this, because programming made easy is my little side project hobby. It's not what I do on a daily basis. It's not my job. It's not my full-time job. I do work for these guys. And some of you have asked me to work on projects. Some of you asked me to fix things on your databases and your applications. And I can't just do that. I have to go through the company I work for, because we charge good money for the consultations that we do and the software development that we do. So I can't just take someone's project up as my own and start working on it, because then I'm basically competing with the company I work for. So Gartman Technical Services is a wonderful company, and I owe them a great debt. I was talking very early on in this video about how I got into development because of these guys. The ability that they gave me to go out and learn, they literally gave me 6 to 8 months of work time. Okay, 8 hours a day that I was working, but I was learning. They gave me that. They gave me 6 to 8 months to go learn something new. They didn't just say, oh, you need to go learn that in your own time. They let me use business time. They were paying me to learn these things. That is the type of thing that this company, Gartman Technical Services, has done. And I'm not afraid to say, I've had offers to go work elsewhere. I've had offers to make more money elsewhere. And I don't do it, because I have a certain sense of loyalty to Gartman Technical Services. It's a father-son owned company. It's a very small company. It's not very big. But just the opportunity that they gave me to learn and grow in this industry was absolutely tremendous, that I have no intentions of going anywhere. It's just, there's no way, because they took a gamble on me, and I want to pay off for them, right? I'm just that kind of loyal. So Gartman Technical Services, they offer a lot more than just software development. They do tech support in the area. And obviously, most of you guys are from around the globe, so tech support doesn't really do much of any good. But there might be an occasion where, if you guys have a network where, you've got somebody that you need to manage your network for you, we can actually do that even remotely. We can remote into systems and take care of them and manage them. And if you have a computer network that needs to be maintained, if you got if you want to set up a domain, for example, maybe your office doesn't have a domain and you need one set up, and you need some help administering that and setting that up, we can go to you. We can take care of that. Typically, we just do local, but if you're willing to cover the cost of flight or something, we'll probably give you a nice big break on the actual hourly rate or something like that, since you cover the cost of the flight. But and if you're close enough, maybe we can handle it. Or if you just need remote support. If you are just having trouble with it, maybe you don't need a complete install. Maybe you just need someone to walk you through the steps, or to manage. Maybe you got some malware problems on some computers. A lot of that stuff can be managed remotely, so you don't have to worry too much about that. So if you need help, if you need a system, any sort of assistance with IT support, we can be a resource for you. We still can. You can go to the gartmantechnical.com website and you can read more about us. You can contact us. You can send us emails, that sort of stuff. So if you do have something that you want to talk to us about, feel free to go to our website and drop us a line. The other thing that we do is just full-fledged websites. We can do a complete, soup to nuts website. So if you've got a concept for a website, it's not a web application, but rather something you want that is more like a business card type of thing, but you want it online. We do websites as well. So we can, build you something like that too. Typically we use Joomla. We're not too big of fans of WordPress around here. We can use WordPress, but we don't like it. We would prefer Joomla. It's just a little bit of an easier tool for us to use. And if you want a full-fledged application, right, a full-fledged web application built for your company, obviously we can do that. And typically I am the one that heads up those type of projects. So that's what I do. I'm the senior software architect here at Gartman Technical Services. So it's my job to oversee any of those projects, everything from Access databases to web applications, even some of the website stuff I kind of tinker around with a little bit, but we have another guy that heads up that department and he manages that mostly. So, oh, my wife chimed in. Look at this. She says, thank you guys for supporting my husband's channel. And I echo that. Thank you guys for supporting my channel. I really appreciate it. I'm glad I can talk to you guys about all this stuff. And I'm glad that you guys come on and watch these videos. I know they're free, but honestly, I do make a little bit of money from those advertisements. So, it's not a whole heck of a lot. It's just kind of a nice thing that comes in every month. But it's not my main focus right now. It'd be great if that was my main focus, but again, I'm really dedicated to these guys, right? They're the reason I'm here. They're the reason I have this channel. They're the reason why. And I mean, think about it right now. I'm working. They're so good to me. The boss, Todd, my boss, Todd, owner and president of the company, he's letting me take this time right now during business hours to talk to you guys on my YouTube channel. That is just an opportunity you don't get very often in this industry. So I definitely want to make sure that you guys are aware of this absolutely fantastic company that I get to work for, and they can definitely help you with the same type of love and support that they give me. They'll be happy to help you out with whatever is going on with your applications or with your tech support needs or your website. So definitely give us a call. Amir, thank you for this live. Hope we see you again soon. Best regards from Bosnia. Look at that, Bosnia and Hong Kong and Brazil. I mean, this is crazy how you guys all watch me from all these different countries. It's absolutely amazing. I'm just blown away by that. All right, so how do you learn and remember so many languages or tools? What's the secret? Mustafa, there is no secret. It is just practice. It's practice and time. It is not, and it's not easy. It's not easy at all. Yes, I do have a nice boss, Mustafa. He is an absolutely fantastic boss. And I was really hoping to interview him today, but he had something that pulled him away. So the next time that we get an opportunity, I still plan on interviewing him. And we're going to talk about some of these things too, about, why did he let somebody like me do what I do? Look at that. He's watching from Qatar. Qatar. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. I know over here in America, we don't really know how to pronounce that word. I don't know why. It's never been totally, explained to us. Daryl says, regards from St. Louis, Missouri. Okay, well, I think that's going to have to wrap it up, guys. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you guys watching this video. And I'm sure some of you guys who missed out on the live session but are going to go back and watch this video are going to enjoy some of the content that we covered. And hopefully I get to see you guys that might have missed this Q&A session in the next one. And I will definitely figure out a way to announce this. Like I said, if you want to find out when I'm going to be doing these, go to Facebook, sign up and like that page, because that is where I post these things. And it's probably the best place you're going to go find out about when I'm going to be doing them. Okay. Until I can come up with some other better system, that's just going to have to work for now. Yeah, bring them live questions so you guys can learn from me. It would be nice. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys, for watching. And I hope that you guys do come visit us on our website. Again, Gartman Technical Services is gartmantechnical.com. I'm going to leave a link in the video description. So if you want to come visit us on our webpage, you certainly can. And, you know, if you have any services that you want done, IT services, web page development, web applications, that's the first point of contact where you guys got to go. So until I see you guys at the next Q&A session, have a great day. And I look forward to seeing you guys there.